We're here with Nate Langston. Appreciate you taking some time to let our clients get to know you a little bit. I know this is not in your normal day-to-day routine to have to take time away from working cases to get on video and talk at me for a little while. But I wanted to, we want to get, our clients to have an opportunity to get to know Nate Langston a little bit as a person and as an attorney. So yeah, I maybe let's start at the top. I want to just get to know you. Can you tell us about where are you from? About your childhood? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm basically from St. George. I was born in Salt Lake, but my family moved down when I was 3 or 4 years old, and lived in St. George basically my whole life. I went on a mission, went to school at the University of Utah, and worked up in Salt Lake for a little while, and then as soon as I could, came back to St. George. So St. George is my home. It's where I've gone to elementary, middle school, high school, went to Dixie College when it was called Dixie College.
Yeah.
And that's who I am. I'm from St. George.
So tell me about so you were in St. George then quite a ways before I was. What was St. George like when you were, a kid, 10 years old?
I grew up in Bloomington, kind of the furthest south home of St. George. Like we were out on a long road, the last house on the long road. And right after my house, there was dirt roads. The river, the Virgin River's behind my house, bordered my house. And me and my friends, my siblings, we lived outdoors. We built forts. We played at the river. We built fires on the river. And we were just like wild kids. And that was totally fine.
Sweet. And so it sounds like you had a bunch of siblings?
Yeah. My parents had 8 and adopted 1, and I'm in the middle of all of that. And so, kind of lost in the middle, I would say.
So you're in the middle of 9 kids.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Normal for me. I didn't know any different. Looking back, I'm like, oh, okay. I was lost in the middle.
Okay.
which good and bad, I think, because my parents, didn't have to keep tight control of me because they just couldn't, because there were so many of us.
Yeah.
So I could do what I wanted. There was very few rules that applied because you could just get away and hide easily.
Yeah. Hide amongst the other 8.
But also, there were times where being overlooked was a problem because, when I was about 4 years old, my family was on a big, convoy vacation with other family members.
Okay.
And we had 3 vehicles. We stopped at some gas station at Mount Carmel Junction, kind of by Zion.
Mm-hmm.
And I got out and was waiting for my mom to use the restroom. So I was standing behind this cinder block wall.
Okay.
And after a little while, I looked and never saw her come out. And so I asked some lady, hey, is my mom in there? And she's like, no, it's empty.
No.
So I got a little nervous. 4 years old, ran to the cars where the cars were, and they were all gone.
Oh, wow.
So they took off and continued their vacation without me.
At 4 years old?
Yeah.
How long did it take them to realize and come back?
They never did. They found out that I was gone about 70 miles later when a police officer carrying me in the car found them.
Oh my gosh.
And we showed up and they were like, why is Nate with the cop?
Wow.
They didn't even realize they left me.
Is that still talked about to this day? Your parents still feel guilty?
Yes. My mom has a good explanation of why she did it. She asked the other car, hey, do you guys have Nate? And they said, they said we have Nate. They said we don't have Nate. So anyway, there was a good explanation, but just lost,
Yeah. Sometimes one word can be pretty important. Yeah.
Words matter. I think that's why I'm an attorney, right?
Yeah. So what would your parents say about you as a kid? How would they describe you as a child? Compared to your siblings, I guess.
I always excelled at school. My dad works construction. He worked at a local shop that did residential electrical work. And I know he was proud of my grades. Yeah. So he told me he'd posted my grades up at the shop over there.
Awesome.
at the shop. So I know he was proud of my grades. So I was I did well in school and he was proud of that. That's what I could say.
Cool. Okay. So you end up growing up in St. George, and you said you went to college at Dixie State?
It was Dixie College when I started, and while I was there, it became Dixie State. Yeah.
Okay. And did you go 4 years there, 2 years there?
I just got my associate's degree. At the time, they didn't have a 4-year degree in a science program, which is what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And so I got as many credits as I could. I got my associate's degree, and then transferred up to the University of Utah.
Okay. And you were pursuing science at the U?
Yeah. From as long as I can remember, like wanting a career, I wanted to be a genetic engineer.
That is so
I set
crazy.
my sights on genetics, and Dixie didn't have anything similar to that. So I went to the U because they had a good science program.
Where did that desire come from? I mean, how did you even know about like the genetics field to have that interest?
High school, I know I had an interest in science before that, just because it interests me in school. That's what I liked. That was the subject that I liked.
Okay.
And then in high school, I had a teacher named Mark Dixon, Mr. Dixon at Dixie. And he really liked biotechnology, and he started a course called biotech. And I was in his academic decathlon. He was like the coach of Acadec. And so he kind of consulted with me and said, hey, would people be interested in this? And he knew that I kind of was a science nerd. And so, he did the class, and I was part of it, and it really interests me. I love the idea of like manipulating genes, gene splicing. The Human Genome Project was going on at the time, and that was super fascinating to me. So anyway, that's kind of what I was wanting to do.
Crazy. So how does that happen then to where today, I mean, you're a high powered, trial attorney, personal injury lawyer. Why are you not a scientist? Walk me through that.
Yeah. So I became a scientist of sorts. I became a chemist, and I worked in a lab, and I was kind of forecasting where my life was going to go if I was on that path. And what I realized was that I loved the theory of the science, but actually doing it was not very much fun.
Really?
Because you're stuck in a lab. There's no windows around you. You're on this lab bench. You've got pipettes and microscopes and chemicals and, big centrifuges and things like that. But it's lonely. It's isolating. And I just didn't like the practice of it. I love the theory of it, but not the practice. So
what's interesting to me about that is that it's lonely and isolating. I feel like in our office today, you're the guy who's like, get off my lawn. Like people are constantly bothering you with questions, coming to you with, hey, I've got this case, for advice and stuff, poking in your door. And you're like busy, hard at work, like leave me alone.
Yeah, that's all true. So I don't even know how to explain that.
So now here you are. You want to be back in the lab, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I like the interaction, though. I like being around people. I like helping people. Okay. And as a scientist, I felt like I could help people, but I never saw the people.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of being able to help people and look them in the eye and have that kind of human interaction with somebody and know that I can do something to help this person.
Yeah.
When I was working in the lab, I would micropipette people's blood and test for, the test that I did was vitamin B1. Okay. And I was finding out if they had the deficiency and what kind of problems they were, but all I saw was a number. And so there was no human connection there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So how does that happen then? Like, so you figure out maybe this isn't for me. How long had you worked as a scientist before you were like, hey, am I going back to law? Like, do I go to law school? Tell me about that.
I worked for about 1.5 years after I got my degree in biochem.
Okay.
And during that time, I kind of was figuring out I didn't love it. And so I branched out and I actually applied for different jobs to try to find out if I would like the law, because I didn't want to jump into being a lawyer if I didn't like that either.
Yeah.
And so I remember calling a few places, and there were a few places that would hire me to kind of be a low level, like runner, or, do different things with bigger firms. And then this firm that did medical malpractice, they said, hey, we'll teach you about this. We'll let you do real stuff. But we can't pay you. And I said, that's fine. I want to learn it.
Okay.
So I got a job working in a medical malpractice law firm, and I didn't get paid. I just did it for free.
How long did you do that?
Not very long. Within a month, I think that they were happy to pay me. They just didn't want to take a chance on somebody that wasn't going to do any good for them.
Gotcha.
So within a month, they offered to pay me more than I even asked for. And then they also back paid me for the time that I worked there for free.
Awesome.
So it worked out well.
Yeah, that's a pretty big success. So how long were you there?
So I worked there while I applied for and got ready for law school.
Okay.
And then I stayed there all the way through law school. So I was there about 4.5 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Did you apply to schools all over or only in Salt Lake? You just had to be there because you had this job, or what did that look like?
There was a few places I would have gone. So I did apply to various places, but I really wanted to stay in Salt Lake because I had that job at a law firm already. So I just kind of had my sights set on Salt Lake, on the U of U, and I got in that school.
Awesome. Yeah, I did not get into the U. It's a good law school. So you get into University of Utah Law School, you're working there. You're there 4.5 years. So tell me what happens to where because you no longer work there today. How does that go down?
Yeah. So, as I was getting ready to take the bar, the guy at the medical malpractice law firm, he had already said, "Hey, I've got a spot for you. So when you take the bar, you can be a lawyer here." So I was, set already. And it was a tough time in the economy too. There were not a lot of jobs. A lot of my friends didn't have jobs.
When is this? When did you graduate law school?
Getting out of in 2011.
Okay.
So the economy had its crisis in 2008, 2009, and then it still hadn't recovered, and the legal field hadn't recovered by 2011 when I was getting out. But anyway, so I had my job set in line, and unfortunately they had some problems with an employee that they had, a lawyer, and they had to rehire. And so they just hired a new guy that they were going to have me take the guy's place. And so it worked out that I didn't have a job waiting for me when I finished or when I passed the bar. So
that had to be kind of a crushing blow.
It was, but it wasn't crushing for too long because my boss helped me find another job because he highly recommended me. And then I got a job at a personal injury law firm, before I even took the bar. So it was fine.
Very cool. Okay. So how long were you at that second firm?
2 years, right about 2 years. And the whole time I was looking for ways to get back to St. George. I thought I'd work in Salt Lake and, kind of learn what I needed to learn there and develop the relationships that I needed to develop, and then try to find a way back home.
Gotcha. Okay. And so so you ended up finding a way back home. You found a job in St. George?
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of legal jobs available in St. George. I think you know that you were trying to do the same thing at some point. And I found a job and moved down, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. What year was that you moved to St. George?
2013.
2013. Okay. So what about family? Tell me a little bit about, so you're married, you've got kids. How'd you meet your wife?
Yeah. So my wife is from El Salvador. Her name is Lucrecia is her full first name. And she had come up to the University of Utah to go to school because she also likes science. She wanted to be a vet. And so she had come up for a science program. And we met at a church function at the University of Utah.
Okay.
So she was...
the church function worked.
It worked, yes. She was sitting at a table in like one of these after church type of activities, and it looked like she was being bored to death by somebody sitting next to her.
Okay.
And so I took my opportunity to go.
You saved her.
And save her. Yes, save her from that conversation. And then it so happened that we kind of left about the same time, and she lived in the dorms. I had a car. And as I left, I saw her kind of walking towards the dorms.
Yeah.
So I pulled up next to her and said, "Hey, do you need a ride?" We had just had a conversation at this church function. She got in my car, and we soon started dating, and been together ever since.
Okay. And that was when? About what year?
Probably 2009.
2009. Okay. So you guys have been together then a long time.
Yeah.
How long have you been married?
12, 13 years.
Okay. And kids. So tell me about kids.
So we've got 3 kids. We've got an 8-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old son. He's almost 5. And then a 3-month-old baby, just turned 3 months this week.
Okay. Fun. How's that having a baby back in the house?
I hate it.
What? Tell me about that. What is it that makes that so tough?
I love it when babies get to be about 9 months to a year, because then they start having some, personality, some reaction time, it becomes fun.
Yeah.
Until then, they don't do anything.
Yeah. They're just a liability.
So you just have to hold them all the time. Otherwise they cry. I don't know. My wife takes care of all that and she does great, but
yeah,
it's not my favorite.
Gotcha. Okay. So once you get back in St. George, you start building your family. You now have 3 kids. Tell me about so career track wise, you worked at the 2 firms in Salt Lake and then you get a job in St. George, and tell me about how that process of how you ended up working with us at McMullin Injury Law.
Yeah. So I worked for that first firm that I got a job with in St. George for about 4 years, 4.5 years. And then there was another kind of bigger law firm that was trying to come into St. George, and they reached out to me and wanted me to kind of head up their St. George presence, kind of as a satellite of their bigger office.
Yeah.
And so it was a good opportunity for me. And so I took that opportunity and worked there and really, really enjoyed it. And then you guys, McMullin Injury Law, you and Anthony kind of knocked on my door and said, "Hey, you've expressed interest in working with us in the past. We're ready to hire another attorney. Do you want to come aboard?" And I would have just months earlier, but now I had this job and I was happy.
Yeah.
So I kind of said, I don't think it can work out. But you guys were persistent and you got me over, and I've been extremely happy ever since. I'm glad I made the decision. Very glad I made the decision. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. I remember that well. Just getting to know you while you were working at another firm in town. And I would kind of utilize you as a resource, cause you'd been at multiple firms and already had so much experience with the litigation process of when a case can't get settled and actually lawsuits have to get filed. And I'm a few years younger than you and was able to pick up a lot of stuff from you. And I remember we wanted to work with you earlier, but our firm was in a growth phase, and I think we're gun shy about, bringing somebody on. But once we finally felt like, okay, yeah, we've kind of waited too long and need somebody, it kind of had to be you. And I remember, when you'd first turned us down, that how crushing that was. But fortunately, you ended up changing your mind and made a decision to make a big switch there when you had a good setup going. And now the 3 of us are partners at McMullin Injury Law, yourself and me and Anthony. And we've grown quite a bit, since then. That was 2018?
Yeah, sounds right.
Somewhere in there, five-ish years ago, probably. So yeah, been a fun road for sure. Tell me about, what your day-to-day is like. What's your role at the firm?
Yeah. So I kind of am in charge of the litigation. So that means when lawsuits are filed, they come to me and I help manage those. I have a roster or most of my cases are in lawsuit. And so that's kind of what I do, is the lawsuit stuff, which is discovery, which is court appearances, motion practice, and jury trials when necessary. So I'm in court, I'm doing depositions, I'm doing, writing motions to the court, responding to motions, arguing motions. In fact, I've got to argue a motion here in court in the next little while we
won't keep you too long.
that I'll be heading to here in a bit. So that's kind of my day to day. And I also help the other attorneys with kind of case analysis, meaning they've got a case and it's a tough situation, or they're wanting some advice on how to try to maximize the value of the case. And so we'll brainstorm those cases, and we hold meetings about brainstorming cases. And I kind of help out with that.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a real lawyer then.
I do real lawyer work.
So
Yeah.
I like to joke about that, or I call you a lawyer's lawyer, just because there's there's obviously a lot of different types of attorneys. Some of those attorneys are never in court at all, and in the personal injury field, unless you're doing a lot of litigation, court appearances are pretty rare. I mean, for me, I've certainly been to court, but it is not frequent at all. And people ask me that all the time. But for you, I mean, how often are you actually in a hearing or trial or any type of court appearance?
Probably a couple times a month on average. So it's not that often. And there's a lot of Zoom, or they do it on WebEx, but a lot of video hearings that I'm doing quite regularly.
Yeah, I would say, as a personal injury attorney as well, but who has worked a lot more of my career in claims than in the litigation, like a couple times a month is actually an awful lot. I mean, for a lot of us in the personal injury field, I feel like a couple times a year can be more typical. So why is it that I know that you like that. I know that you love being able to do the lawyer's lawyering, right? What is it that draws you to that? Why do you enjoy that? For me, I find that to be very stressful and heavy and tedious.
Yeah. I don't know. I do know that I have kind of some, I don't like authority. And I don't like it when people get picked on. And there's something that really just, I connect with a fight. And when I feel like there's a worthy fight, I'm all in, and I can get very serious about the worthy fight. And to me, that's what we do, is we help people that need help, individuals that need help. And I feel like this is a way for me to get in the ring, so to speak, and to go fight it out with the bad guy. And they're not necessarily bad guys on the other side, but in my mind, I'm fighting against insurance companies, corporations that pick on and beat up and hurt the little guy. And I get to step in their shoes and go in the ring and fight for them. And that's why I love it. I've always had a little bit of piss and vinegar in me, and that's kind of who I am. And this gives me an opportunity to do that and help people at the same time and provide for my family too.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get to be the kind of the teeth that when the buck kind of has to stop with you. Right. So tell me about, so for a lot of people, many of our clients that hire us, some of the first words out of their mouth when they call, because they're hesitant to even call. We don't like personal injury attorneys in Southern Utah generally. We generally trust insurance companies, and we love our neighbor. Nobody wants to sue anybody. So, we get people that are really concerned and scared about, but I don't want to, even though the little old lady ran a red light and hit me, I can't sue her. That makes me a bad person. I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah. Everybody has that sentiment. And what's ironic is that a lot of people in the community think that, they're a personal injury plaintiff, they're suing somebody. What's wrong with them? Well, the reality is that anybody put into a bad scenario has limited options. And when you have an insurance company, this big, massive corporation they've made decisions to line their pockets with money to hurt these people, meaning they're not going to pay what's fair, then their only option is to file a lawsuit. And nobody wants to do that, but they're kind of forced into a corner and they feel like they have to. And what I tell them is, look, the person that crashed into you, if it's a motor vehicle crash, or the company that hurt you, they've got insurance that will cover, they'll hire an attorney for you. They will pay whatever verdict or settlement there is. It's not really going to hurt the little old lady that ran the red light and crashed into him. You're just trying to get what's fair from an insurance company for which that little old lady paid premiums her whole life and never made a claim. And so it's just, it's accessing justice through a fair and reasonable process and fighting against an insurance company that only sees you as a claim number and not as a human being.
Totally. Yeah. So those two truths are pivotal to me. One is that nobody wants to file a lawsuit. A lawsuit is only filed when an insurance company just won't pay what's fair, right? And it's the only way to then get a third party to decide what is fair, right? And to get them to do what they don't want to do. And then two is that the little old lady's not paying a red cent. She's fine. She's got insurance for that exact reason. Even when you win, even if you have to file a lawsuit against the little old lady and you win, it's all the insurance. I think a lot of people don't understand that. I know you had a pretty big win in a trial recently. Can I bug you to share a little bit about that war story?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And that kind of speaks to even when a person that causes a crash loses big at trial, it still doesn't affect them. And in this case, this girl that caused a crash, she got a text or some kind of notification on her phone. She looked down at it for a moment. She lost track of what's going on in front of her. A car had stopped in front of her, waiting to turn left. So just a normal stop in the road.
Okay. And
she didn't see the vehicle in front of her carrying a family of 5 coming home from church. And she smacked into the back of them. She didn't mean to hurt anyone.
Sure.
She had an insurance company and they backed her and they wouldn't pay what was fair. And she only had a policy of insurance that wasn't very much. And so we asked, hey, insurance company, pay that policy that this young girl had purchased that would cover her for this crash. And they refused. And so we had to take it to a jury trial. We made lots of opportunities to settle the case within that person's insurance policy before the case went to a jury trial. And then we got a really good verdict that was much more, in fact, 3 times more than her insurance policy covered her for.
Do you remember what the best offer was from the insurance company that they ever gave to try to just settle it and resolve it how they're supposed to?
Yeah, we tried to settle the case early on, and they had responded. I think their best offer before trial was like $24,000, something like that. And the girl's insurance policy was $50,000. So they were offering up not quite half of her insurance policy. We took the case to a jury trial, and the jury decided that the case warranted a verdict of $150,000.
Wow.
So it was 3 times the girl's policy limit, which some people might worry, hey, well, what's going to happen to her if that's more than her insurance was covering her for? Well, because the way that we do things, the insurance company has a lot of risk if they don't pay it. So they actually paid the full $150,000 verdict and just wrote a check, protecting the girl that caused the crash. She looked at her phone and caused a crash, and she didn't have any negative consequences other than being named in a lawsuit. Nobody likes that.
So we all, can make mistakes driving. It's a part of life. It's why the law requires we all have insurance. So the girl that made the mistake driving, how much of the $150,000 did she end up having to pay in the end?
0.
Okay. So the insurance company offered $22,000. You ended up getting a jury to decide that the fair amount was $150,000. So six times their best offer. Why was that case worth $150,000? What were the injuries? What happened to this family that got rear-ended?
Yeah. So we settled the wife's case. We settled the 3 kids' cases. They were kind of minorly hurt, I would say. They fared very well because they got hit pretty hard.
Okay.
But the dad, Sam, he ended up having kind of this long-standing neck pain that just kind of wouldn't go away. And the insurance company could never quite believe or understand that he had this pain because you couldn't see it on the outside. If you met him, you wouldn't know that guy has neck pain.
Yeah.
It's something, it's one of these invisible injuries that's there for him that you can't see. And so the insurance company says, good luck proving it.
Sure.
And so that's what we set out to do, is to prove that his longstanding neck pain was real and that it was worthy of fair compensation. And so we put witnesses on, we put experts on, we explained the medical science behind how the spine works, how the ligaments support the bones and the spinal column. And when those ligaments get stretched and torn in a motor vehicle crash in this case, that those can be permanent injuries. And his doctors explained that to the jury. His wife explained how he had changed and was different and needed a lot more attention to his neck. And it also affected his ability to work. It was a serious issue for him. The insurance company never bought it, never understood it. The jury did, though. And they made what I saw was a fair award.
So you've got this father of this young family then that's dealing with long-term neck pain. And when you say long-term, like, are you talking like his neck bothered him for 6 months after getting hit by rear-ended by this car, or how long? Good
question. So he went to get medical treatment for a few months, about 4 or 5 months, and then found out that wasn't making him considerably better. It helped. It was helping kind of keep things together for him. And then when he stopped, his neck pain bothered him. So his wife would do like almost nightly massages. She had a whole routine where she'd warm a wet towel and put it on his neck and massage him with all these different creams and stuff. And it was going on to the day of the trial, meaning it was likely, and his doctor testified, he was likely going to have that pain chronically or for the rest of his life.
So you're saying the crash was how long ago?
I can't remember how long ago it was prior to trial, but probably 3 years.
Okay. So, I mean, a lot of times people, luckily heal well. They get hurt in crashes and recover. But you're telling me that sometimes when human beings get hit by cars, they do not heal well.
Unfortunately, that's a reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And insurance companies, can have a hard time, wanting to pay for that when it happens, but sometimes those bad things do happen for sure. Tell me about, do you have any other, war stories of like anything crazy that's happened in a deposition, or giving us some insight into, other things that happen in the litigation process?
Yeah. So, let me share a little story about how these cases are defended. Because that's something that really kind of gets at me. Where you have a case where you've made a demand to the insurance company for an amount within the adverse driver, the at-fault driver's insurance. And once a lawyer gets hired, this is a true story. The lawyer tells the at-fault driver that the dirty plaintiff and the dirty plaintiff's lawyer are asking for way more money than they really are. And they use like little tricks to explain it in a way that's not necessarily a lie, but it's just very misleading. And so in deposition, I've asked people, and one that I'm thinking about specifically, I asked this young woman, hey, did State Farm, her insurance company, did they tell you that we had made a demand within your policy limit and that you wouldn't have to pay anything if they accepted the settlement? And she said, no. I was told that you guys were asking for $300,000, which was in reality probably 30 times what we were asking for.
Wow. Okay.
And she's like, I'm just a college student. I don't have that kind of money, making it seem like State Farm told her that she'd be on the hook for it unless she got in line and played ball and helped them defend the case. So
State Farm was lying to their own insured, using her as a pawn to try to save their money.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I like the fight, because there is an unscrupulous party on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Tell me about, do you remember, the last 7-figure settlement that you had?
Yeah, I do. It was for a girl from Florida. She was 15. She came out with her 2 brothers and an uncle to visit some family in St. George. And while they were here, they decided to rent an ATV. So they went to a local place here in town and rented an ATV and took the ATV out into the desert. And her brother that was driving the ATV overturned it. So he didn't understand how to drive them, and he wasn't explained how to drive them, and he overturned it. And she instinctively put her hand out and grabbed the roll cage.
People tend to do that, huh?
We've seen that. I currently have a case with the same facts. So as many signs and warnings, keep your hands inside the cart at all times. Your natural instinct, if the vehicle you're in is starting to roll, is to place your hand out to brace, either on the roll cage or out. And there's so many upper extremity injuries, arm injuries, hand injuries with that. And this girl's hand was pinched between a rock and the roll cage, and her whole hand was severely broken. And she was life flighted down to Vegas, and they tried to save her hand, and ultimately were able to save her thumb and a part of her palm, but all 4 of her fingers were amputated.
Jeez.
And it was a really sad situation for this young girl. And one of the stories that I love coming out of that case was finding out that before this incident, she had signed up in school for a sign language class. Mm. And she had this, and it's a 2-part class, like 2 semesters or something. I didn't fully understand that, but she took the first part of it before this injury.
Okay.
And then she goes back to school and she signed up for the second part. Mm. And her teacher was like, you don't have to do this class with your injury. I mean, she was missing most of her hand, her dominant hand. And she said, well, this isn't going to stop me. And that's what I liked about her, is that she had this drive that that terrible thing that happened to her wasn't going to stop her.
Yeah. Like I can still do ASL without a hand. Yeah. Jeez. So that's, a 7-figure settlement is obviously a huge amount of money. How often do you see injuries that are so bad that even $1 million doesn't, make you square, doesn't make you whole? I mean, to me, like imagining if I lose, 4 fingers on my hand and essentially left with only one functional hand, $1 million is a ton of money, but I'm looking at it going, geez, I would rather go back in time and have my hand. How often do you see an injury that severe that warrants that type of settlement? Yeah.
Well, it's rare when you have a really big injury and enough money to cover that injury. And that you have somebody that's liable for it and an insurance company that has the ability to pay. So all of those factors coming together, it's pretty rare. But I will say this, I've seen a lot of settlements. I've seen some really big settlements and some low, small settlements, but it's a very rare when I ever see an amount of money that somebody puts in their pocket that I would gladly trade the injury for that money. Meaning, it's never, money can't replace loss of health. Yeah. It can just make it as, you can make their life as comfortable as possible. You can provide the medical care that will help them. You can provide wheelchairs and ramps and, live-in nurses and things like that. You can provide that with money, but you can never get the health back. Yeah. And so I would never trade the money for the injury.
Yeah. Yeah. So that can be a hard thing for people to understand, is that you get only one body and one life, and you don't get to go back in time. And so when you get hurt in a severe way, and the law is trying to make you whole and trying to financially time machine you in a way to make you square for what happened to you, that's when those numbers can get big, right? What about like a small case? Like, let's say if I get rear-ended and it causes me neck and back pain, sprain, strain, whiplash stuff, and I'm in pain for a few months and it interferes with my daily life short term, but I heal super well. Let's say after 4 months, I have 0 long-term problems whatsoever. I'm every bit as healthy as I was. What's a fair value for something like that? How do you value that?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing because everybody's life is different. So I'll sometimes tell my clients this scenario, which is we want to explain to the insurance company how this injury impacted you specifically, because a leg injury that hurts somebody for a month is very different, even if it's the exact same injury, on 2 different people. I use this example. My mom is an avid marathon runner. She's run the St. George Marathon, I think more than 30 times.
Jeez.
Ever since I was a small kid, she was running St. George Marathon, and she's run Boston and LA and lots of other marathons.
Cool.
But if when she was preparing to run Boston, if she got a leg injury that prevented her from, checking that off her bucket list, so to speak, that's a big deal. And that injury is worth a lot more than the same injury on somebody that maybe they love to just sit and watch TV all day, and that's all they do anyway. So an injury to somebody's leg that does that all day is very different than somebody that's, preparing to run a marathon.
Yeah.
So every case is a little bit different. And that's where the value, I think, of having somebody that knows how to talk to insurance companies and knows how to threaten insurance companies, frankly, to get them to do what's right, adds value. Because an insurance company only sees lower extremity injury. That's worth X. And they don't care who X is.
Sure.
Until they're forced to.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in to force the insurance company to see the person behind the claim number.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. So tell me about Mountain Dew.
I'm addicted. My name is Nate, and I'm addicted to Mountain Dew. I wake up and I have a Mountain Dew for breakfast. That's typically my breakfast.
So you get a hard time in the office going through. I mean, how many Mountain Dews do you go through a day?
I try to limit myself to 4 12-ounce cans of Mountain Dew per day. Sometimes it's 5, depending on the day. But I drink a lot of Mountain Dew.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme amount of Mountain Dew consumption. So tell me about what's your I just want to get to know you as a person a little bit more, the Nate behind this trial lawyer. What's your favorite book?
I think my favorite book of all time is probably Ender's Game.
Ender's Game. I
read it when I was a young kid, and I think I read it probably 10 times.
No way. What do you like about it?
It's a young kid that was really smart, and he was used by the government to help defeat an alien invasion. It's like a sci-fi case. They made a movie about it probably 15 years ago.
So the science nerd in you was just very into that.
Yeah. And I don't know. He used his brains to defeat the enemy.
That's what you do today, right?
And I like to think that that's what I do. And,
okay.
And maybe not surprisingly, I'm also fascinated by mixed martial arts. I love it. I took some classes. I would never get in the ring and actually fight anyone, but I love the idea of that, where with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically, it's the idea that a smaller person can defeat a much larger person by using kind of tricks of how body mechanics work and how you can find places to put joints in stress with very little force. And I remember as a kid, my older brothers, big family, right? Older brothers would get these DVDs of early UFC fights.
Yeah, I remember those.
And Royce Gracie was the winner of the first 3 or 4 of these tournaments. And Royce was 160, 170 pounds, thin, 6'2". And he fought and defeated these monsters that just looked like they would just rip this kind of skinny guy apart.
Yeah. And
he would avoid the strikes, and he would take them down, and they would tap and cry with his submissions. And I love the idea of using wit to defeat an enemy.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of parallels there to what you actually do. I'm starting to understand you a lot better. Okay, so you're using this legal jiu-jitsu to accomplish this Ender's Game result for your clients. Tell me who are some people in your life that have been the most influential mentors to you, whether that's as a kid, or in your professional career, whatever that might be, whoever that brings to mind.
Oh, that could be deep. It could be a deep question. I'll start off deep. When I went to law school, or I was applying to law school, you have to write like a statement, some kind of written statement. And I chose to write mine about my dad. And the reason is because I explained before, my dad is an electrician. He didn't go to college. He didn't care for studying. And I always, as a young kid that prided myself on being smart, I always kind of resented him for that, or for some way didn't respect him. I saw other people in the neighborhood and they were, professionals, and they had gone to college and all of that. And my dad didn't. But it took me a long time, or maybe some time, to realize why. Because my dad is a smart, very smart guy, and he loves to study and he loves to read books. But I had to learn his life story a little bit more, which was he went on a mission, and immediately upon returning, he was drafted into Vietnam.
Okay.
And by the time he got out of Vietnam, his time to go to college had passed. And it was time to get married and start a family. He wanted a big family. And so the opportunity just wasn't there for him. And it was because of circumstances largely outside of his control.
Yeah.
And that helped me understand, like, learning the human story, learning every human has a different story, putting yourself in their shoes, putting their skin on and walking around for a little while, really helps you understand people a little bit better. And I think that helps me in what I do, like having to understand my dad and actually realizing that what he did was very successful by raising a big family that all love him still, which I think is pretty rare.
Yeah.
And he has a good relationship with every one of his kids, his very strong marriage. And he is a success story, but not a success story as I saw it as I was a kid, but I see it as a success story now.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think there's value in learning somebody's story and being able to see life through their eyes and understand the decisions they made through the lens of what they had to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest markers of a successful life is probably when you get to be, older as a parent and your children want to spend time with you. I think that's a pretty good marker for the type of person that you are, for sure.
Professionally, I had an attorney at one of these places that I worked at early on that was excellent on his feet. He was an excellent arguer. He could tell the best story you've ever heard. You'd just be laughing and joking along with him. And he could get information from people that nobody else could. So in a deposition where you place somebody under oath and you ask them questions, people clam up and they don't really want to answer the questions. And so they're very tight-lipped and it's hard to get information out of them, even though they're required by law to tell the truth and to answer the questions.
Yeah.
But I learned from Darren Davis how to kind of get people to open up and to be comfortable in that process and to lighten the mood a little bit so that they will answer the questions that you need them to answer.
Yeah.
And so in the way that he could argue a case, in the way that he could just kind of be with someone and strip away the formality of the legal process was really something that I try very hard to emulate even now when I'm taking depositions, even though I've done thousands of them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Darren Davis. Yeah. It's very, very impressive attorney. Yeah. And I feel that way about you. I feel like, looking at you, you're an equity partner at, the largest market share personal injury law firm in your region where you live, where you grew up, getting to do really big things for people. How do you think your dad looks at you today?
I think he still looks at me much the same way, where he's kind of putting my report card up on his wall.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think he's proud of what I've been able to accomplish. And then I have a good relationship with my dad. And that's how I think he looks at me.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else about your story that you would like to add while I've still got you here on camera?
just about being a dad, which is, I mentioned earlier that I don't love the baby stage, but I love it when they get out of the baby stage. And I've got 2 kids out of the baby stage right now, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I love spending time with them.
What type of stuff do you guys like to do?
Ledger, the 4-year-old, he has this little electric motorcycle, and that's his favorite thing to do. So he'll go outside and hit this little jump that I built for him out in front of the house, or we'll take it to the park and he'll ride around, and he loves to do that. Luna and Ledger both love to play card games. So I play card games with them, go fish is kind of what we do.
Yeah.
And matching games and things like that. And I get home from work and I put work aside, and I just try to be with my kids and my wife for, the few hours that I have before bedtime and start over again. But I always take some time to do that with my kids. And then on the weekends, Saturdays are special. Ledger asks every day, what day is it today? Because he's waiting for Saturday when I don't have to go to work. And we try to do something fun, either go out side by siding out in the dunes, or during the summer we go boating a lot. So I try to do stuff with them that I can spend time with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can definitely relate to the day of the week question for sure. What's that like to, have to leave your kid and go to work and take on stuff that is stressful and heavy? I mean, how do you deal with that? And then how do you turn that off and focus back on your family when you get home?
The turning it off is hard, but where my kids are little balls of sunshine, I mean, it helps. So I get home and it may have been a heavy day. It may have been awful. I may have talked to a parent that lost a kid, and that's hard. It's so hard to talk, to look at somebody and try to empathize with them having lost a child, and then come home and see your kids, but then they're smiling faces and, Daddy, we're so glad you're home. Can we play right now? I gotta get out of these clothes, and then we can. But it helps the transition to kind of shake off the heaviness of the battle that I go through during the day, to get home and to put that away and to put a smile on my face, because I know that that's important for them, and to have fun and play and just be dad to them.
So suit comes off and dad clothes come on.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for letting us get to know your story a little bit.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been fun.